Picture the weapon in your hands right now, a Paleolithic spear, with the physics of a modern compound bow bolted on, stored tension, gear ratios, energy released on command, in the grip of a hunter who, for most of history, came home empty. Give your ancestors that, and a spear that once tapped out near 35 meters a second suddenly doesn't miss. Do it, and humans either conquer the planet 10,000 years early or strip it bare. This is a thought experiment about physics and ecology, not a weapons guide. So strip that upgrade back off for a second. Picture the same you, the same skeleton, at the edge of a grassland 40,000 years ago. But the point in your hand is just a point now. Nothing stored, nothing multiplied. That plain spear was the most advanced hunting technology on Earth at the time, and on its own, it barely worked. That is the strange truth this whole video hangs on. Your ancestors were not failing because they were weak, or slow, or stupid. They were failing because physics was against them. The tools could only store so much energy. The math had a ceiling. And every day they hit that ceiling and walked home hungry. So the question is simple, even if the answer is not. What happens if you lift the ceiling? What happens if you hand that same hunter, with that same body and that same brain, the mechanical tricks that took another 40,000 years to invent? Do you feed everyone? Or do you empty the world? Before you go looking for that answer, subscribe. This channel takes one strange thing about being human and follows it all the way down to why you are the way you are. New questions like this one every week. Now here is the first thing you have to understand, because everything else depends on it. Start with the spear, because the spear is where the trap lives. A hand-thrown spear is powered entirely by your arm. Your shoulder rotates, your elbow snaps, and whatever speed your hand reaches, the spear reaches too. That is the whole engine. There is nothing stored, nothing multiplied. Your body is the machine, and your body has limits. So your ancestors built the first real upgrade, and it was brilliant. It was called the atlatl, a spear thrower. Basically a stick with a hook on the end that cradles the back of a dart. When you throw, that stick becomes an extension of your arm. It makes your arm longer, and a longer arm swings its tip faster, so the dart leaves your hand quicker than your bare hand could ever throw it. Here is where you need a real number, not a movie number. For decades, people guessed that atlatl darts flew far faster than they actually do. Then an archaeologist named John Whitaker put real instruments on it. Radar, chronographs, the same gear used to clock a fastball. And in a study published in 2017, the honest ceiling came out lower than the legends. A skilled thrower tops out at around 35 meters a second. That is about 78 miles an hour. Fast, yes. But that is the ceiling, not the average. The best throw of a good thrower on a good day. Now feel what that means on impact. One tracked dart hit a target with about 106 joules of energy. Sounds like a lot, but watch where the energy goes. After it passed through a torso-sized block, standing in for an animal, only about 15 joules were left. The rest, roughly 60 joules, got eaten just punching through hide and muscle. 60 joules, gone to get through the front door. That is the trap. Your ancestor is not missing because the animal is armored in steel. They are missing because a real dart, thrown by a real arm, carries a razor-thin margin of energy. A little too far, a little off-angle, a tough patch of hide, and the shot that looked perfect in the air simply does not have enough left to finish the job. The prey runs. The day is wasted, and the physics never bends. So now do the thought experiment on purpose. Imagine you could reach into the future and pull back one idea. Not a rifle. Nothing with gunpowder. Just the compound bow. A device from the 1960s that quietly solved the exact problem your ancestor could not. Because the compound bow does something the atlatl can never do. The atlatl is a lever. It multiplies your motion in real time, and the moment your arm stops, the giving stops. There is nothing held in reserve. A bow is different. A bow is a spring. It takes energy while you draw it and stores it, waiting until you decide to let go. And the compound bow is the cleverest spring anyone ever built. Picture what happens next. Here is the problem with any simple bow. The harder you want it to hit, the harder it is to hold. A heavy longbow fights you the entire time you pull it back, and it fights you hardest right at the moment you are trying to aim. Full draw, arms shaking, the whole weight of the bow pushing your fingers open. So there is a natural limit to how much energy a human can hold steady long enough to aim well. Your muscles cap the weapon. The compound bow breaks that link with a trick of geometry. Instead of simple tips, it has wheels, cams, at each end, shaped so that the force curve flips near the end of the draw. Early in the pull, you fight the full weight. But as the cams roll over, the effort collapses. At full draw, you might be holding only 10 to 35% of the peak force. The industry calls the rest, the let-off, somewhere between 65 and 90% of the weight simply vanishing from your fingers. Meanwhile, the limbs stay fully loaded. The spring is at maximum tension. You are just barely holding it. Sit with how strange that is. You get to hold a fully loaded weapon at almost no effort, which means you can aim for as long as you want. The energy is no longer capped by your muscles. It is capped by the machine, speaking only in comparative terms. No specs, no build steps, just the physics of the leap. A modern compound bow launches an arrow at roughly 370 feet a second. A traditional longbow, the pinnacle of the old way, manages around 200. Those are trade figures, not one clean laboratory study, so hold them loosely. But the direction is not in doubt. It is a large jump, and it comes almost free of extra human effort. Now hand that to your Stone Age hunter. Everything they lacked, this fixes? The energy margin that used to vanish punching through hide? Now there is energy to spare. The shaking, rushed aim of a heavy draw? Gone. They can hold and wait, steady, patient, releasing only when the shot is certain. The precision energy transfer that used to depend on one perfect throw becomes something they can repeat, aimed and calm, again and again. And the human doing the aiming is not some lesser creature. This is the part people get backward. Your Paleolithic ancestor was not a dim brute stumbling toward a mammoth. They read weather, tracked animals for days, knew every plant and every trail, cooperated in groups, and taught skills across generations. Give a mind like that a tool that finally keeps up with it, and you do not get a small improvement. You get a different kind of animal. Because remember, the real ceiling was never the hunter. It was the hardware. Even the best hunters alive today, using traditional methods, run into it. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, a skilled hunter brings down big game only a handful of times a year. Roughly once a month, sometimes only once every 3 months. Any kill at all, large or small, happens on maybe 1 day in 6. The Jew/Honsi of the Kalahari come home with meat on fewer than 27 days out of 100. These are expert people, born to it, and most days the world tells them no. Now imagine that no becoming a yes far more often. Not because the people changed, but because for the first time, the tool stopped being the weakest link. That is the super hunter. And a super hunter does not stay a private miracle. It changes what the whole landscape can hold. Here is where you have to be careful, because this is where a good story can quietly turn into a false one. So watch the honesty closely. An ecosystem is a balance sheet. Every predator is limited by how many animals it can actually catch, and that limit is what keeps the prey alive. Wolves do not eat every elk, because wolves miss. Lions do not eat every gazelle, because lions fail more often than they succeed. Failure is not a flaw in nature. Failure is the brake, the thing that keeps the whole system from tipping over. Now take the brake off one predator. Take the species that already hunts in coordinated groups, already plans, already teaches, and hand it a tool that turns most of its failures into successes. You have not made hunting easier. You have removed the thing that protected the prey. And in ecology, remove a limit and the effect does not stay local. It ripples. Scientists call that ripple a trophic cascade, a change at the top of the food chain that rolls all the way down to the plants and even the land itself. Take Yellowstone. In the 1920s, the United States government wiped out its gray wolves. Elk multiplied and stripped the riverbanks bare. In 1995, wolves returned, elk pressure eased, trees regrew along the water, and the story goes the rivers themselves changed shape. Researchers like William Ripple and Doug Smith have studied it for decades. The viral version, how wolves change rivers. But here is the honest part, and you deserve it. That clean, magical version is oversold. The core mechanism is real. Remove or restore a top predator and the ecosystem does respond. But how big the Yellowstone effect actually was, how much was really the wolves versus weather, drought, and beavers is something ecologists are still arguing about right now. The picture is murkier than the viral video makes it look. So keep the mechanism, drop the fairy tale. Predators shape ecosystems. Yes. Wolves single-handedly rebuilt Yellowstone like a switch. Not so simple, which brings you to the biggest, oldest version of this question. Because something did happen at the end of the last ice age. Across the planet, the giants vanished. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, cave bears, the megafauna, gone in a geological blink. And one of the loudest suspects, for 60 years, has been your own species. In the 1960s, a scientist named Paul S. Martin proposed what became known as the Pleistocene overkill hypothesis. His idea was blunt. Wherever humans arrived, the big animals disappeared soon after. A rolling wave of extinction following human footprints across continents. Skilled hunters, spreading into lands full of animals that had never learned to fear a human, hunting them faster than they could breed. Overkill. And now feel the weight of the thought experiment. If a hunter with only a stick and a razor-thin energy margin might have helped push the giants over the edge, what would a hunter with the ceiling lifted have done? Not faster killing as a brag, faster killing as a consequence. The break gone, failures turned to successes, the balance sheet running one way. That is the empty world the opening warned you about, arriving early. But you promised yourself honesty, so here is the other side, and it is strong. In 2021, a major paper in Nature Communications argued that in North America it was climate change, not human population growth, that best lines up with the megafauna decline. The world was warming, habitats were shifting, and the giants may have been dying from a changing planet with or without a spear in the picture. Then in 2024, isotope analysis of a child's skull from Montana, roughly 12,800 years old, showed a diet heavy in mammoth. A point for the hunter's mattered side. One data point, not a verdict. So do not let anyone, including this video, tell you it is settled. The overkill debate is one of the biggest unresolved arguments in archaeology, genuinely split, and it stays open. The thought experiment lives inside that open question. It does not close it. Now turn the camera around, away from the animals and onto the people. Because a tool that changes what you can catch also changes what you can own, what you can defend, and what you might take. And here you have to be even more careful, because this is the part where it is easiest to invent a story that sounds true and is not, so flag it plainly. This next stretch is guesswork, the video's own speculation, not documented anthropology. Keep it labeled that way in your head the whole time. Here's the tempting story. If better tools make some hunters far more successful, maybe success turns into status, and the best provisioned become the most powerful. Maybe the flat, sharing band tips into a ladder. A few at the top, everyone else below, hierarchy born from hardware. It is a clean story. It is also, as far as the real evidence goes, not supported. Because look at what actually shows up in the societies people have studied. Yes. Among the Hadza, a good hunter is genuinely attractive. A better campmate, a better partner. Prestige is real, but dig in and it gets slippery. Asked who the best hunters were, the Hadza often named who was generous and well-liked as much as who was truly skilled. A noisy signal, not a clean scoreboard. Another study found Hadza foragers, women and men both, hunt mainly to feed their households, not to show off. And a 2023 paper found status does not drive stress among Hadza men the way rank does in steep hierarchies, because these are largely egalitarian groups, not ladders. So the honest reading is this. Real foraging societies had prestige, but they resisted turning prestige into permanent power. Sharing was the norm. The best hunter fed the camp. He did not rule it. Which means the superweapon creates kings story is not a fact you can lean on. It is a possibility the thought experiment invites. Nothing more. That said, stay inside game theory for a moment, because there is a colder version that does not need the hierarchy fairy tale. When resources are scarce and evenly matched, competing groups reach an uneasy standoff. Neither side can push too hard, because the cost is too high. That balance, the same break you saw in the ecosystem, is what keeps competition from tipping into open conflict. Now imagine one group holding a large advantage in range and reliability while its neighbor does not. The standoff logic breaks. Suddenly, one side can apply pressure the other cannot answer. Over territory, over water, over the best hunting ground. Archaeologists do find evidence that intergroup violence existed deep in the human past. It is not a modern invention. What the thought experiment adds is not new cruelty, but a new imbalance. A lopsided ability to press an advantage, arriving before any social system existed to check it. And still, whether that imbalance would harden into lasting domination or simply spread until everyone had it, is exactly the open question the opening left you holding. So pull it all together, because you are almost at the answer you were promised. Everything you have seen points one direction: speed. A modern projectile mechanism does not change what humans are. It changes how fast they get there. It compresses time. The energy margin, the patient aim, the failures turned to successes, the break taken off the ecosystem, the imbalance between groups. Every one of those is an accelerator. The species does not become something new. It becomes itself, sooner. And that is the real reason the opening gave you two endings instead of one. Because acceleration cuts both ways, and which way it cuts depends entirely on a thing the tool cannot supply. Down one road, the empire. The lifted ceiling means more food, more often. Fewer hungry days. More children surviving. More knowledge kept. More people freed from the daily grind of the hunt to build, plan, and settle. The march toward farming, towns, and everything after gets a running start. Humans conquering the planet, in the opening's words, 10,000 years early. Down the other road, the empty world. That same efficiency, pointed at animals that cannot breed fast enough to survive it, strips the land of its giants before anyone understands what is being lost. The break is gone. The balance sheet runs one way, and the accelerator that could have built an empire instead builds a silence. Same tool, same hunter, opposite outcome. And here, finally, is the resolution the opening owed you. Which one actually happens? The empire or the empty world? The honest, science-grounded answer is that the tool does not decide. The physics is neutral. A lifted ceiling is just a lifted ceiling. What decides is whether the hunter using it can see past the next kill to the empty grassland it leads to. Whether restraint arrives as fast as capability does, because that is the whole trap, and it is not a Stone Age trap. It is yours. Every real power your species ever unlocked arrived exactly like this compound mechanic spear. As raw capability, with no restraint attached, the wisdom to hold back always lagging behind the ability to push forward. The overkill debate is still open precisely because both endings are real possibilities baked into the same human hands. You are the animal that lifts its own ceiling. The only question that ever mattered is whether you learn to stop before you strip the world that fed you. So here's what to do with that. Drop a comment. Knowing everything you just saw, if that compound mechanic spear existed 40,000 years ago. Empire or empty world? Say which, and say why. The best answers get their own follow-up. And if this is your kind of question, the physics that hides inside being human, subscribe and stay. Because next week there is another one waiting. Your body is still a throwing machine. That part never changed. The instinct is wired into your shoulder, the same as it was for the hunter at the edge of the grassland. What changed is the size of the lever the world keeps handing you. And the answer to the opening was never in the spear. Get here, and you know which kind of predator you were built to be, the one who could strip the world bare, holding a tool that could, and choosing, just barely in time, not to.